3 weeks ago, a document landed on my desk in Ouagadougou, classified, marked with Israeli intelligence seals. Within 6 hours of us making copies, their cyber division attempted to scrub it from every server in West Africa. They failed. What you're about to hear is why Benjamin Netanyahu's government has spent millions trying to bury this paper trail, why French intelligence warned me to lose the file, why the CIA offered us a trade deal worth $800 million if I agreed to never speak about what's written on those 17 pages. I'm Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, and today I'm going to tell you exactly what was in that document and why the most powerful intelligence apparatus in the Middle East is terrified of you knowing it exists. This isn't speculation. This isn't theory. This is what happened when we found the blueprint. It started on September 14th, a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays are when I meet with our intelligence directorate, the men and women who keep this nation from being torn apart by foreign operators who think Africa is still their playground. Colonel Sawadogo walked into my office with a leather briefcase. He's not a man who panics. 30 years in military intelligence. Survived 3 coup attempts. Fought off mercenaries from 4 different countries. But that morning, his hands were shaking when he set the briefcase on my desk. "Mr. President," he said, "we intercepted something." I opened it. Inside was a tablet. On the screen, a scanned document. Hebrew text at the top. English translation below. Israeli government letterhead. Confidential markings. And a signature I recognized immediately, Yossi Cohen, former Mossad director, now private consultant to Netanyahu's office. The title made my blood stop. Operation Harmattan, Strategic Containment Protocol for Sahel Sovereignty Movements. Harmattan, that's what we call the dry wind that blows across the Sahel from November to March. Hot, relentless, suffocating. They named their operation after the wind that chokes West Africa every year. I started reading. The first page was a threat assessment, not of terrorists, not of extremists, of me, of this government, of every leader in West Africa who dared to say that our resources belong to our people, not to foreign corporations, not to intelligence agencies, not to the donor class that's been bleeding this continent dry since the colonial flags came down. They ranked us. Burkina Faso, threat level 1. Immediate destabilization required. Mali, threat level 1. Niger, threat level 2. Guinea, monitoring. Chad, strategically compromised asset in place. I'll come back to that last part, because when I read it, I realized we weren't just fighting corruption, we were fighting a coordinated machine. Let me read you some of this. Direct quotes. Because if I'm going to burn bridges with the most powerful intelligence state in the world, I'm going to do it with their own words. Target states demonstrate increasing resistance to IMF-imposed structural adjustment. Traoré administration has canceled 14 extraction contracts since August 2023. Priority: destabilize revenue streams through commodity market manipulation. Coordinate with trading desks in London, Tel Aviv, New York. Gold price suppression window, October-December. You hear that? They weren't just watching us cancel exploitative mining deals. They were planning to crash gold prices, the backbone of our new economy, to starve us into submission. And it gets worse. Al Jazeera, BBC, France 24, amplify narratives of military dictatorship and human rights concerns. Embed journalists with opposition figures. Budget: 4.2 million USD for Q4 2024. Talking points attached in Appendix C. I had our team pull up Appendix C. It was a script, literally, pre-written articles, headlines, interview questions for independent journalists to ask opposition leaders, all designed to paint us as tyrants. One line stood out: frame resource sovereignty as xenophobia, link Traoré to authoritarian models, Russia, North Korea, avoid economic analysis. They didn't want anyone asking why we were kicking out foreign mining companies. They wanted the world to think we were crazy, dangerous, unhinged. This is where I felt my stomach turn. Confirmed assets in Ouagadougou, 4 economic advisors, 2 NGO directors, 1 senior military officer, activation codes assigned. Contingency: if political pressure fails, initiate Article 12. Article 12. I flipped to the back of the document. Article 12. Terminal Protocol. In the event that economic and political destabilization efforts fail to remove Traoré administration within 18 months, authorize kinetic solutions. Coordinate with private contractors. Plausible deniability essential. Estimated cost, 15 million USD. Kinetic solutions, that's intelligence jargon. It means assassination. They budgeted $15 million to kill me. Now you're asking, why? Why would Israel, a country thousands of miles away, spend this much money, this much effort to destroy a small nation in West Africa? The answer is in Section 1, the part I didn't read yet. The Sahel region represents the final frontier of contestable resource extraction in sub-Saharan Africa. Burkina Faso's gold reserves, estimated 800 metric tons. Uranium deposits, sufficient for regional energy independence. Rare earth minerals, critical for defense tech supply chains. Traoré's Pan-African rhetoric threatens the accords. If Burkina Faso successfully nationalizes extraction and builds sovereign refining capacity, contagion effect across 15 African states becomes inevitable. Loss of economic leverage in region estimated at 47 billion USD annually. The accords, they didn't name it in the document. In 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, Israel needed allies, needed trade routes, needed resources. So they made deals, quiet deals, with dictators across Africa. You give us cheap uranium, discounted minerals, intelligence sharing, and we'll give you weapons, surveillance tech, training for your secret police. For 50 years, that system worked. Dictators stayed in power. Israel got what it needed. Europe got cheap resources. America got strategic depth. Then people like me came along. We didn't ask for permission. We didn't ask for loans. We said, this gold, it's ours. This uranium, it's ours. These rare earth minerals that you need for your fighter jets and your missile systems, they're ours. And we're not selling them for pennies while our people starve. That's the threat, not terrorism, not extremism, sovereignty. Because if Burkina Faso proves you can kick out the exploiters and survive if we build refineries, if we create jobs, if we turn resources into schools and hospitals instead of profit margins for foreign shareholders, then every country on this continent will ask the same question. Why are we still playing by their rules? That's what this document is really about. It's a manual for crushing hope. But here's what made this document truly dangerous. It wasn't just Israel. They were coordinating. French DGSE, Primary Ground Intelligence, CIA, Satellite Reconnaissance and Signals Intercept, Mossad, Asset Management and Contingency Planning, MI6, Financial Pressure through Commonwealth Channels, 4 intelligence agencies, working together, targeting us. The document had communication protocols, encrypted channels, meeting schedules. There was a line that said, monthly coordination call, first Tuesday, 2200 hours Zulu, secure line Oscar 7. We tracked Oscar 7. It's a satellite relay owned by a private contractor in Virginia, the same contractor that works for the Pentagon. They were treating Burkina Faso like an enemy state, not because we attacked anyone, not because we threatened anyone, because we dared to say our resources belong to us. And the asset list, that's what haunts me. Confirmed assets in Ouagadougou, 4 economic advisors, 2 NGO directors, 1 senior military officer. I read that line 50 times. 1 senior military officer. I have 11 generals, 43 colonels. Who was it? For 3 days I couldn't sleep. Every meeting I looked around the room and wondered, which one of you is selling us out? Colonel Sawadogo ran a counterintelligence sweep, monitored communications, financial records, travel histories, and on September 19th, we found him. I won't say his name. Not because I'm protecting him, he's in custody now, but because the moment I name him, this becomes about one traitor. And it's not. It's about a system that creates traitors, that finds the weakest link and offers them money, power, security for their families, anything to betray their country. He was feeding them meeting schedules, security protocols, my travel routes. When we arrested him, he didn't deny it. He just said, "They told me you were going to get us all killed. They said if I helped them, they'd protect my family when you fell." He believed them, because they're very good at making people believe. Let me take you back to Article 12. The kinetic solutions. The document had a timeline, trigger conditions, escalation matrix. Phase 1, Economic pressure, freeze donor funding, pressure IMF and World Bank to withhold loans, coordinate with mining companies to threaten lawsuits. Timeline, 6 months. Phase 2, political destabilization, amplify opposition movements, fund protests, embed journalists with dissidents, create humanitarian crisis narrative to justify international intervention. Timeline, 6 months. Phase 3. If Phase 1 and 2 fail, Article 12. Assassination. They gave themselves 18 months to remove me through soft methods. After that, they'd kill me. The document even had contractor recommendations. 3 firms. I won't name them either because naming them is giving them free publicity. But I'll tell you this, all 3 have contracts with the U, and all 3 have been linked to political assassinations that were never officially solved. There was a budget breakdown. 15 million USD itemized. Target reconnaissance, 1 million. Local asset recruitment, 2 million. Operational execution, 10 million. Contingency and cleanup, 2 million. They planned for contingency, for cleanup. Like this was a business transaction. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. To them, it is business. Killing a president who won't play ball, that's just cost of doing business. Line item in a black budget, approved in some air-conditioned office in Tel Aviv or Langley, filed away, forgotten. Except we found the file. Here's what happened after we made copies. September 14th, we intercepted the document. September 15th, I convened an emergency security council. Told them what we found. Ordered all copies to be stored in 3 separate locations, analog and digital. No cloud storage. No foreign servers. September 16th, the attacks began. Our government servers got hit with a denial of service attack, massive, coordinated, took down our Ministry of Defense website, our central bank portal, our national ID database. Lasted 4 hours. Our cybersecurity team traced the origin. Servers in 3 countries, Israel, United States, France. September 17th, I received a call, encrypted line, no caller ID. The voice spoke French with an accent I couldn't place. He said, "Mr. President, you have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it, and this ends quietly." I said, "I have a document that reveals a plot to kill me. Why would I return it?" He said, "Because if you don't, what's in that document becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy." Then he hung up. September 18th, a French diplomat requested an urgent meeting, flew into Ouagadougou on a private jet, sat in my office and told me, very politely, that the document was misinformation designed to create division between allies. I asked him, "If it's misinformation, why are you here?" He didn't have an answer for that. Then he said, "There are ways to make this beneficial for everyone. We're prepared to offer infrastructure investments, 800 million USD, roads, schools, hospitals. All we ask is that you destroy the document and never speak of it publicly." A bribe. Wrapped in development aid. I told him to leave. September 19th, we arrested the senior military officer, the asset. September 20th, American diplomats arrived. Same pitch, different number, 1.2 billion USD in trade agreements. Just make this go away. I asked them, "How much is my life worth to you? Because according to this document, you already budgeted 15 million to end it." They left without answering. Now, you might be thinking, okay, they tried to silence you. They failed. But why does this one document matter so much? Surely Israel, France, the CIA, they've done worse things. Why is this the thing that has them scrambling? Because it's proof. For decades, leaders across Africa have said it. We've known it. The coups, the assassinations, the economic sabotage, it's not random, it's not chaos, it's coordinated, planned, budgeted, but we never had proof. Just suspicions, patterns, whispers. This document is the blueprint. The smoking gun. 17 pages that lay out, in clinical detail, exactly how they break sovereign nations. If this gets out, if the world sees how they operate, it doesn't just hurt Israel, it exposes the entire system. Think about it. How many African leaders have been killed in accidents, plane crashes, car wrecks, sudden illnesses. Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Muammar Gaddafi, Jovenel Moïse. How many were dismissed as paranoid when they said foreign powers wanted them dead? This document proves they weren't paranoid, they were right. And that's why Israel is terrified. Because once people see the manual, they'll start asking, how many times have you used it before? After I refused the bribes, the pressure escalated. The IMF announced a routine review of Burkina Faso's eligibility for emergency funding. The World Bank delayed a $100 million education loan. The European Union issued a statement expressing concern about democratic backsliding. None of them mentioned the document, but the timing was clear. Then the media blitz started. Suddenly, every Western news outlet had the same story. Traoré regime cracks down on dissent. Human rights groups warn of authoritarian turn in Burkina Faso. Is Ibrahim Traoré the next African dictator? I watched the coverage, read the articles, and I recognized the language. Word for word from Appendix C. The script they wrote. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Al Jazeera ran a segment with an opposition leader I'd never heard of, gave him 10 minutes of airtime to call me a tyrant, didn't mention that he left Burkina Faso 12 years ago and lives in Paris. Didn't mention that his opposition party has 47 members, but they gave him a platform. The BBC interviewed a human rights expert who said my government was stifling free speech. Didn't mention that the expert works for a think tank funded by you, guessed it, the same defense contractors named in the assassination protocol. It was coordinated. Surgical. And if I didn't have the document, I might have believed I was going crazy. But I had the proof. I knew this was the playbook. Let me take you deeper into the Israeli connection, because this isn't just about one document. Israel has been operating in Africa since the 1960s. Training programs, military aid, intelligence sharing, and for a long time African leaders welcomed it. Because after independence, we needed help building our armies, our security services. But that help came with strings. In exchange for training, Israel got access to resources, to intelligence, to strategic locations. Burkina Faso had a relationship with Israel for years. They trained some of our officers, sold us surveillance equipment, and in return, we turned a blind eye when their operatives used our territory as a transit point for operations across West Africa. But when I took office, I asked a simple question: what are we getting from this relationship? The answer: not much. They sold us equipment at inflated prices. They trained our officers, then recruited some of them as assets. They used our airports for refueling, our borders for intelligence operations, and we got surveillance tech that came with backdoors so they could monitor us. It wasn't a partnership. It was exploitation. So I ended it, canceled the contracts, told their operatives to leave, closed the intelligence sharing agreements, and that's when I became threat level 1. The document makes it explicit. There's a section 11, titled Traoré Case Study, Cost of Severance. It reads, Traoré administration terminated bilateral agreements in March 2024, resulting in loss of strategic access across Sahel corridor. Reassertion of Israeli interests requires removal of current leadership. Recommend immediate action. They're not even pretending this is about security. It's about control. When I shut the door, they decided to kick it down. Remember earlier when I mentioned Chad? Strategically compromised asset in place. Let me explain what that means. Chad is our neighbor. Borders Burkina Faso to the east. For years, Chad's been a French client state. French military bases. French advisors embedded in the government. France treats Chad like a puppet, and Chad's leadership has been happy to play along. But the document revealed something worse. Chad maintains cooperative posture. Asset Tango 9 confirmed in transitional government. Recommend continued financial support, 12 million USD annually. Utilize Chad as staging ground for Burkina operations if primary protocols fail. Tango 9, that's a code name. Someone in Chad's government, high-ranking, trusted, is on their payroll. $12 million a year to keep Chad in line, to use Chad as a base for operations against us. And staging ground for Burkina operations? That's military language. They're planning to use Chad's territory to launch attacks, covert or otherwise, into Burkina Faso. I can't prove who Tango 9 is. Not yet. But I know this. When Chad's president speaks, he's not always speaking for Chad. Sometimes he's reading from someone else's script, and that's the genius of their system. They don't invade, they don't occupy, they just buy key people, turn governments into franchises, and if you refuse to sell, they destroy you. The document included financial records. Not complete clearly, they didn't expect this to leak, but enough to trace some of the money. 3 shell companies, registered in Delaware, Luxembourg, and the Cayman Islands. Innocuous names: Sahel Development Partners, West African Infrastructure Group, Trans-Regional Economic Forum. All 3 funneling money into the operation. We had our financial intelligence unit dig into them. Here's what they found. Sahel Development Partners, owned by a hedge fund with ties to Israeli defense contractors. The fund's largest investor, a private equity firm that manages money for the Israeli government's pension system. West African Infrastructure Group, registered in Luxembourg, but the actual ownership is hidden behind 6 layers of holding companies. Our team traced it back to a firm in London, same firm that lobbied the UK government to freeze Burkina Faso's aid packages last year. Trans-Regional Economic Forum, this one's the most blatant. It's a non-profit that claims to promote economic cooperation in developing regions. Their board of directors includes a former Mossad agent, a retired French intelligence officer, and a World Bank economist who was fired for ethics violations. A non-profit with a spy, an intelligence officer, and a disgraced economist. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. And the money? It flows from these shell companies into accounts across West Africa. Payments to consultants, grants to civil society organizations, scholarships for young leaders who just happen to spend a year in Tel Aviv or Paris before returning home as activists. It's not charity, it's infiltration. Let's go back to Appendix C, the media script. I want to read you some of these talking points, because once you see them, you'll recognize them everywhere. Talking point 1. Traoré's anti-Western rhetoric threatens regional stability. You've heard that, right? Every article, every analysis, anti-Western. But here's the thing, I'm not anti-Western, I'm anti-exploitation. I've said repeatedly, we'll work with anyone who respects our sovereignty. We'll trade with anyone who pays fair prices. We'll partner with anyone who treats us as equals. But the moment you say fair prices, you're labeled anti-Western. Because the system depends on unfair prices. Talking point 2. Concerns about human rights under military government. I'm not going to pretend we're perfect, no government is, but let's be honest about what human rights concerns really means in this context. When we arrest someone for corruption, someone who stole millions from public coffers, Western media calls it political persecution. When we shut down a foreign-funded NGO that's paying protesters to destabilize the capital, that's restricting civil society. When we tell a mining company they can't dump arsenic into our rivers, that's hostile business environment. But when France props up dictators who torture dissidents, when American allies in the Gulf execute people for dissent, silence. It's not about human rights. It's about obedience. Talking point 3. Traoré isolated from international community. This one makes me laugh. I've met with leaders from 30 countries in the past year, signed trade deals with China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan. We're negotiating partnerships with Brazil, India, South Africa, but because we're not taking orders from Washington, Paris, or Brussels, we're isolated. No. We're liberated. The document knew exactly what it was doing. Craft the narrative. Repeat it across enough outlets. And eventually, it becomes truth. That's the power of the machine. It doesn't matter what's real. What matters is what people believe. For 3 weeks, I sat on this document, showed it to trusted advisors, debated what to do. Some said, keep it secret, use it as leverage, make deals behind closed doors. Others said, release it immediately, expose them to the world. I chose the middle path. I'm releasing it now, but not to the media, not to governments, to you. Because here's what I've learned. The traditional channels are compromised. If I hand this to the New York Times, it gets filtered. If I give it to the UN, it disappears into a committee, gets investigated for 3 years until everyone forgets. But if I put it directly in front of the people, if I let you see it, read it, judge it for yourself, they can't control the narrative. That's why I'm doing this. Because I want you to understand what we're up against. Every leader who stands up to this system faces the same playbook, the same pressure, the same threats. And if we don't expose it, if we keep pretending this is normal, it will never stop. There's one section of the document I haven't mentioned yet. Saved it for now because it's the most damaging. They planned for this. They knew there was a risk the document could leak. Here's what it says. In the event of unauthorized disclosure, initiate Protocol Black, full denial, discredit source as fabrication. Deploy media assets to label document as Russian disinformation or conspiracy theory. Activate allied governments to issue statements dismissing authenticity. Estimated containment window, 72 hours. 72 hours, that's how long they think it takes to bury the truth. And I've already seen it happening. 2 days after I told my Security Council about the document, an anonymous intelligence source told Reuters that Burkina Faso's government was spreading Russian disinformation to justify anti-Western policies. I hadn't even mentioned Russia. But they planted the seed. Then a think tank in Washington, one of those places that sounds neutral but is funded by defense contractors, published a report titled Disinformation Campaigns in the Sahel. Guess who was featured? Me. They're running Protocol Black, right now, even as I speak to you. And that's why I'm not waiting. That's why I'm releasing this before they can build the wall of denial high enough. Because once the lie is established, the truth becomes the conspiracy theory. I don't know what happens after this. I can't predict how they'll respond. But I can tell you what I expect. First, they'll deny it, call it fake, claim it's been manipulated, say I'm paranoid, desperate, dangerous. Then they'll attack the source. They'll say we stole it through cyber espionage, that we're criminals, that this proves we're rogue actors who can't be trusted. Then they'll escalate the pressure. More sanctions, more media attacks, more opposition leaders given primetime interviews. And if that doesn't work, well, you've read Article 12. I'm not naive. I know the risk I'm taking by speaking publicly. I know that every word I say right now makes me a bigger target. But here's the thing. I was already a target. The moment I said Burkina Faso's gold belongs to Burkina Faso, I was a target. The moment I canceled the contracts that gave foreign companies 70% of our mining revenue, I was a target. The moment I told France we don't need their military bases on our soil, I was a target. This document just confirmed what I already knew. And if I'm going to be a target anyway, I might as well make it count. If you're watching this and you live in the West, in America, Europe, Israel, I want you to ask yourself a question. Did you know? Did you know your government was doing this? Planning assassinations, bribing officials, manipulating media, all to control African resources? Or did you think we were just unstable, that our problems were our fault, that poverty, corruption, violence, that's just how Africa is? Because that's what they want you to think. They want you to believe we're helpless, that we need them, that without their aid, their intervention, their guidance, we'd collapse. But the truth is the opposite. We're not poor because we lack resources. We're poor because our resources are stolen. We're not unstable because we're incapable of self-governance. We're unstable because every time we try to govern ourselves, they destabilize us. We're not corrupt because it's in our nature. This document is proof, and I need you, anyone who believes in justice, in fairness, in the idea that people have a right to control their own destiny, I need you to understand what's at stake. This isn't just about Burkina Faso, it's about a system, a global system that depends on keeping us down. And if we don't break it, it will break us. But here's the part that gives me hope. We're not alone. The document mentioned it almost like a warning to themselves. There's a line in section 14. Growing solidarity bloc poses strategic risk. Monitor Traoré coordination with Mali, Niger, Guinea. Secondary concern, increasing engagement with BRICS-aligned states. They're worried because we're building something they can't control. After we found the document, I reached out to our neighbors, Mali, Niger, Guinea, leaders who've been through the same pressure, the same threats. I showed them the document, and they weren't surprised. Mali's leadership said, "We've been saying this for years, now we have proof." Niger said, "They tried the same thing with us. Different document, same playbook." Guinea said, "This is why we formed the Alliance of Sahel States, because alone they pick us off one by one. Together we can resist." And it's not just the Sahel. We've had quiet support from leaders across Africa, from countries in Latin America who face the same tactics, from nations in Asia who remember what it's like to be treated as resource colonies. They can't say it publicly, not yet, because they know what happens when you speak out. But in private meetings and encrypted calls, they tell me, keep going, we're watching, and when the time is right, we'll stand with you. That's the future they're trying to prevent, not just one resistant leader, an entire block of sovereign nations who refuse to play their game. Let me zoom out for a moment, because this isn't just about Africa. The document reveals something bigger. The system is cracking. For 70 years, the post-World War II order has been held together by a simple rule. The West controls resources, currency, and narrative. Everyone else plays by their rules. But that system is breaking down. China's offering an alternative. Russia's offering an alternative. The BRICS nations are building parallel financial systems. Countries are trading in their own currencies instead of dollars. And Africa finally is waking up. We're not asking for permission anymore. We're not waiting for development aid that comes with conditions. We're building our own infrastructure, refining our own resources, making our own deals. And that terrifies them. Because if Africa controls its own resources, if we keep the profits instead of shipping them to London, Paris, New York, the entire global economy shifts. Gold prices, we set them. Uranium prices, we set them. Rare earth minerals, we set the terms. Suddenly, the West doesn't have leverage anymore. That's what this document is really trying to prevent, not just my presidency, the end of their monopoly. I want to be honest with you about something. This fight has cost me. I don't sleep well anymore. Every time I get in a car, I wonder if this is the day. Every meal, I think about poison. Every advisor, I wonder, are you loyal or are you Tango 9? I've lost friends, people I trusted, who decided the risk was too high, who took the money, the exit visas, the promises of safety. I don't blame them. This is a heavy burden. My family lives with security I never wanted for them. My children can't go to school like normal kids. My wife can't walk through a market without armed guards. That's the price of resistance. And there are days, I'll admit it, there are days when I think, is it worth it? Wouldn't it be easier to take the deal, take the money, live quietly? But then I think about Thomas Sankara. Sankara was president of Burkina Faso in the 1980s, tried to do what I'm doing, build sovereignty, resist exploitation. They killed him in 1987. Shot him in a coup orchestrated by French intelligence. Before he died, he said, "While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas." They killed him. But his ideas didn't die. I grew up hearing stories about Sankara, about his courage, his vision. And those stories made me believe that change was possible. If I quit now, if I take their money and disappear, what message does that send? It says they win. It says resistance is futile. It says the only choice is submission. I can't accept that. So yes, this fight has cost me. But the alternative, living as a puppet, watching my country be bled dry, that would cost me more. Here's the irony. By trying to suppress this document, they've made it more powerful. If they'd ignored it, if they'd just denied it quietly and moved on, maybe it would have faded. Maybe people would have dismissed it as just another conspiracy theory. But they panicked. The cyber attacks, the bribes, the media blitz, the diplomatic pressure, every move they made to bury this proved it was real. And now it's too late. Because I've made copies. Dozens of them, stored in locations they'll never find, distributed to people they can't touch. Encrypted and uploaded to servers in countries that don't cooperate with Western intelligence. If something happens to me tomorrow, if they activate Article 12, those copies go public, automatically. To journalists, to activists, to governments across the global south. To anyone who'll listen. They can kill me. But they can't kill the truth anymore. And that's the difference between now and 1987, when they murdered Sankara. Back then, information could be controlled, a document could be burned, witnesses could be silenced. But we live in a different world now. The internet exists. Encrypted communication exists. They can take down our government servers, they already tried, but they can't take down the thousands of devices that now hold copies of this document. The genie is out of the bottle. Since we secured the document, I've quietly shared sections of it with other African leaders. Not all of them, only the ones I trust, the ones who've shown they're serious about sovereignty. And what's happened has been remarkable. In Mali, their intelligence service used the asset identification protocols from the document to uncover 3 of their own compromised officials. All 3 were receiving payments from accounts linked to the same shell companies. In Niger, they discovered that a pro-democracy NGO that had been organizing protests was funded by one of the groups named in Appendix F. When they audited the NGO's finances, they found wire transfers totaling $2.4 million over 18 months. The NGO's director fled the country the day before he was scheduled to testify. In Guinea, they identified a journalist, someone who'd been writing articles calling for international intervention to restore democracy, who was on the payroll of a think tank mentioned in the media manipulation section. He'd received 60,000 euros in consulting fees over 6 months. For what consulting? Writing articles that matched the talking points word for word. The document isn't just exposing what happened to us. It's giving other countries a roadmap to identify how they're being infiltrated. It's like we found the master key to their entire operation. Let me go back to that section about gold price manipulation, because this is something people need to understand. Section 2, Economic Pressure Points, didn't just suggest manipulating commodity prices, it had instructions. Coordinate with trading desks in London, Tel Aviv, New York. Gold price suppression window, October-December. Target, 15% decline. Method, coordinate futures dumping. Amplify strong dollar narrative in financial media. Delay sovereign purchase agreements. They were planning to crash the gold price. Why? Because Burkina Faso's new economic model depends on gold. We've nationalized our mines. We're refining domestically. We're using gold to back our reserves instead of holding dollars. If the gold price crashes right when we're building this new system, it destroys our revenue, makes us look incompetent, forces us back to the IMF with our hands out. But here's what they didn't count on. We found out. So in late September, I made a call to the central banks of countries that were also moving away from dollar reserves. China, Russia, Iran, India. I told them, they're planning to dump gold futures in October to crash the price. If you're holding gold, now's the time to buy more. And they did. In early October, when the coordinated futures dumping started, when the trading desks in London and New York started selling massive positions to drive the price down, our allies started buying. Every time they pushed the price down, buyers stepped in. The price stabilized. Their manipulation failed. That cost them. Not just money, though they lost hundreds of millions when their short positions didn't pay off. It cost them credibility. Because now the market knows. They tried to rig the game, and they failed. And that's a signal to every other country watching. You can resist. The system isn't invincible. I promised I wouldn't name the 3 contractor firms mentioned in Article 12, and I won't. But I will tell you what we learned about how they operate. After we identified the firms, our intelligence team started tracking them. Flight records, financial transactions, personnel movements, and we found a pattern. In the 6 months before a political transition happens in an African country, a coup, an assassination, a sudden death, employees from these firms show up. Not many, usually 2 or 3. On tourist visas. They rent houses in quiet neighborhoods. They set up shell companies, usually consulting firms or security services. They make contact with local military officers. Low level at first. Buy them dinners. Offer them money for information. Then they start recruiting. They identify officers who are dissatisfied, who feel overlooked for promotion, who have financial troubles. And they make an offer. Help us and you'll be rewarded. Refuse and you'll be replaced by someone who will. And once they have enough people inside, they wait. They wait for the right moment. A protest, an economic crisis, some event that creates chaos. And then suddenly there's a coup. The president is killed, or arrested, or flees the country. And the officer who led the coup, he's the one they recruited 6 months earlier. That's the playbook. We've seen it in Côte d'Ivoire, in Central African Republic, in Sudan, in Chad multiple times. And it was about to happen here. One of the contractors had already arrived, September 7th. We didn't know who he was at the time. He was traveling on a Canadian passport, using a fake name. But after we got the document, we cross-referenced the arrival dates of foreign nationals with the timeline in Article 12. He checked into a hotel in Ouagadougou on September 7th, The document was dated August 29th. The timeline said, asset deployment, early September. It matched. We tracked him. For 5 days, he met with 4 different people. 3 were mid-level military officers. 1 was a businessman with government contracts. On September 12th, we arrested all 5 of them. The contractor lawyered up immediately. Claimed he was in Burkina Faso for business consulting. Refused to say what business. Refused to say who hired him. We held him for 72 hours, the legal limit. Then we deported him. But we sent a message. We know who you are. We know what you're doing. And we're watching. 2 weeks later, 2 more contractors left West Africa. Suddenly, no explanation, just packed up and flew back to Virginia. They realized the operation was blown. Remember how I said they'd run Protocol Black? Full denial, discredit the source, label it disinformation? Right on schedule. October 1st, 15 days after we secured the document, a story appeared in the Times of Israel. Headline, Burkina Faso regime spreads forged documents to justify anti-Israel stance. The article quoted an Israeli intelligence official who said the document was crude disinformation, likely produced by Iranian or Russian operatives. No evidence, just an assertion. October 2nd, a French newspaper, Le Monde, ran a piece titled Traoré's Conspiracy Theories, a Danger to Regional Stability. The article didn't even engage with the content of the document. It just said I was increasingly erratic and isolated from reality. Classic ad hominem. Attack the person, ignore the evidence. October 3rd, the BBC aired a segment on disinformation in Africa. They showed a graphic with my face next to a Russian flag and a Chinese flag. The implication was clear. I'm a puppet spreading lies for foreign powers. Never mind that the document is in Hebrew and English. Never mind that it has Israeli government seals. Never mind that we have the digital forensics to prove it's authentic. They don't care about facts, they care about narrative. But here's what they didn't anticipate. People are skeptical now. The Iraq WMD lies, the Libya intervention, the Syria chemical weapons debates, the Russiagate saga. People have watched the media get it wrong or lie outright too many times. So when they say disinformation, a growing number of people ask, compared to what? Your information. The trust is gone. And that's why their counteroffensive isn't working the way it used to. While Western media was calling me a conspiracy theorist, something else was happening on the ground in Africa. People were paying attention. Not just in Burkina Faso, across the continent. In Ghana, university students organized protests in solidarity with us, signs that said, "We believe Traoré and Africa for Africans." In Kenya, activists started calling for an audit of foreign-funded NGOs. They wanted to know how many of these organizations are doing what the document describes. In South Africa, a member of parliament stood up in the National Assembly and demanded that the government investigate whether South Africa was also being targeted by similar operations. In Nigeria, a popular musician released a song called The Blueprint. The lyrics were about breaking free from foreign control. It went viral, 10 million streams in the first week. The document touched a nerve. Because people know, they've always known, deep down, that something was wrong. That the poverty, the instability, the endless dependence on foreign aid, it wasn't natural. It was engineered. But they didn't have proof. And without proof, it's easy to dismiss as paranoia. Now they have proof. And it's awakening something. A consciousness. A solidarity. The elites in London, Paris, Washington, Tel Aviv, they don't understand this. They think if they control the narrative in their media, they control the world. But the African street doesn't watch BBC. They're on WhatsApp, TikTok, Telegram. They're sharing the document, translating it into local languages, discussing it in ways the mainstream media never would. That's the revolution they can't stop. Here's something interesting. Not everyone in Israel is comfortable with this. About a week after the document leaked, a former Mossad officer, retired, no longer active, gave an interview to an Israeli newspaper. He didn't mention the document directly, but he said something revealing. He said, "Israel's operations in Africa have become too aggressive. We've shifted from strategic partnerships to destabilization campaigns, and it's going to backfire." The interviewer asked why. He said, "Because we're creating enemies where we don't need them. Countries like Burkina Faso aren't a threat to Israel. They're not funding Hezbollah. They're not attacking us. They just want control over their own resources. And by trying to crush them, we're proving that every conspiracy theory about us is true. That interview caused a stir, because it validated what we've been saying. There's a faction within Israel, small but growing, that believes this approach is unsustainable, that you can't build security on the backs of destabilized nations, that eventually the blowback will be catastrophic. But they're not the ones in power. The people in power, Netanyahu's circle, the hardliners in the security establishment, they believe in dominance. They believe that if you show weakness, you get destroyed, so they double down. The document is a product of that mindset: control or be controlled, dominate or be dominated. But what they don't realize is that this mindset is exactly what's destroying their legitimacy. Because the world is watching, and the more they try to crush sovereignty movements, the more they reveal themselves to be the thing they claim to be fighting against: tyrants. I haven't talked enough about France. Let me fix that. France is mentioned 63 times in the document. That's more than any other country except Israel. Why? Because France has never left Africa. They like to pretend colonialism ended, that we're all independent now, all equals. But the truth is, France still controls 14 African countries through a currency union, the CFA franc. They still have military bases in 7 countries. They still extract billions in resources every year through French corporations. And they still intervene militarily, economically, politically whenever an African leader tries to break free. The document makes this explicit. French DGSE maintains primary human networks across Francophone Africa, leverage existing colonial infrastructure for operational support. Priority: prevent CFA exit contagion. If Burkina Faso successfully transitions to sovereign currency, Mali and Niger likely to follow. Containment critical. CFA exit contagion, that's what they're afraid of. Because if we leave the CFA franc, if we print our own currency, control our own monetary policy, the entire system collapses. Right now, 14 African countries are required to deposit 50% of their foreign reserves in the French treasury. 50%. That's billions of dollars. Money that should be invested in our schools, our hospitals, our infrastructure sitting in Paris, earning interest for France. It's a scam, a legal, institutionalized scam. And we're breaking free from it. Burkina Faso left the CFA franc in 2024, Mali followed, Niger is preparing to follow. And France is panicking. Because if the CFA system collapses, they lose leverage over half the continent. They lose cheap uranium from Niger, cheap cocoa from Côte d'Ivoire, cheap gold from Mali. They lose their empire. That's why they're working with Israel on this. Because they have a shared interest: keep Africa dependent. The United States plays a quieter role in the document, but it's there. CIA provides satellite reconnaissance and signals intelligence. Primary interest: counter-terrorism operations and rare earth mineral security. Secondary interest: prevent Chinese divided by Russian expansion in region. Recommend minimal direct engagement. Optics liability. Optics liability, that's telling. America doesn't want to be seen as the bad guy in Africa, not after Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, so they stay in the background. But they're there. They provide the intelligence, they operate the drones, they fund the think tanks that write the reports calling us authoritarians. And they offer the money. Remember that $1,200 million trade deal the diplomats offered? That came from USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. It's brilliant, really. They dress up bribes as development assistance. And if you refuse, they accuse you of hurting your own people. Why won't you take this money for schools and hospitals? Because it's not for schools and hospitals. It's for control. Every dollar comes with conditions. Open your markets, privatize your resources, accept our advisors, let our corporations in. And if you refuse like we did, suddenly you're a pariah, a rogue state, a threat. The document even has a line about this. If economic incentives fail, pivot to sanctions narrative, frame refusal as corruption rather than sovereignty. They've already started. There are whispers in Washington about reviewing Burkina Faso's trade status, about concerns over financial transparency. It's the setup, the prelude to sanctions. But we're ready, because we saw it coming. If you're a leader in the global south or a citizen who wants your country to be truly independent, this document is a manual, not for how they operate, but for how to resist. If you want to protect your sovereignty, you have to secure your institutions, root out the assets, audit the NGOs, track the money. It's not paranoia, it's counterintelligence. You can't win the information war by playing defense. You have to go on offense. Tell your story directly. Use every platform available. Don't wait for the BBC or CNN to give you a fair hearing. They won't. They want to pick you off one by one. So build alliances. Coordinate with your neighbors. Create blocks that are too big to bully. The alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger is our answer to that. We're stronger together than apart. Why did they panic when this document leaked? Because secrecy is their weapon. Once people see how the system works, it loses power. So expose them, every chance you get. The gold price manipulation failed. The bribes failed. The cyber attacks failed. The media blitz isn't working. Why? Because we adapted. We learned. We fought back. And that's the final lesson. Resistance is possible. It's hard. It's dangerous. But it's possible. Let me tell you what happens if we don't resist. Look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, richest country in Africa by resources. Cobalt, copper, diamonds, gold, coltan, everything the modern world runs on. And yet, the Congolese people are some of the poorest on earth. Why? Because for decades, foreign powers have fueled civil wars, backed warlords, and extracted resources while the country burned. Millions have died. Millions. And the world shrugs. Because dead Africans don't interrupt the supply chain. That's what happens when you don't resist. When you let them in. When you play by their rules. Your resources get stolen, your people stay poor, and when you complain, they call you corrupt. Or look at Libya. Gaddafi tried to create an African currency backed by gold, tried to unite Africa economically, and what happened? NATO bombed the country into the Stone Age, killed him in the street, and now Libya is a failed state run by warlords and slave traders. That's the cost of resistance, you might say. But I say, that's the cost of failing to resist collectively. Gaddafi was alone. He didn't have allies who would stand with him when it mattered. We're not making that mistake. Let me tell you what they're really afraid of. It's not me. I'm just one person. If they kill me tomorrow, someone else will rise. What they're afraid of is the vision. An Africa that controls its own resources, that refines its own minerals, that trades on its own terms. An Africa that doesn't need loans from the IMF, that doesn't need military bases from France or America, that doesn't need permission from anyone. An Africa that builds its own industries, educates its own people, feeds its own populations. That Africa would be unstoppable. 1.4 billion people, 30% of the world's minerals, 60% of the world's arable land, the youngest population on the planet. If we ever get our act together, if we ever unify, even partially, we become a superpower overnight. And that's what keeps them up at night. Because right now, the global economy runs on our exploitation. The cheap cobalt in your smartphone, the cheap cocoa in your chocolate, the cheap uranium in their nuclear reactors. All of it extracted at gunpoint, essentially, through rigged contracts, corrupt officials, and the threat of violence. But what happens when we say no? What happens when we demand fair prices? What happens when we keep the profits and invest them in ourselves? The entire system collapses. That's not hyperbole. That's math. And that's why this document exists. To prevent that future. So what happens now? First, we continue securing our sovereignty. We're building refineries, gold, uranium, other minerals. So we're not exporting raw materials and importing finished products at a markup. We're investing in agriculture, food security. So we're not dependent on imports that can be cut off as leverage. We're building alliances. The alliance of Sahel states is just the beginning. We're in talks with other regions. East Africa, Southern Africa, North Africa. The vision is a confederation, not a superstate we've learned from the failures of the past, but a coordinated bloc, free trade among ourselves, mutual defense, shared infrastructure projects. Second, we're going to release more. This document isn't the only thing we have. There are other files, other evidence, other operations. We're going to release them systematically, piece by piece, so the world can see the full scope of what's been done to this continent. Third, we're going to build alternatives. They control the financial system, we'll build our own. We're already working on an African payment system. No dollars, no euros, just trade among ourselves in our own currencies. They control the media, we'll build our own. African-owned platforms, African journalists telling African stories. They control the infrastructure. We'll build our own. Roads, railways, ports built with our money, our labor, for our benefit. It's going to take time, maybe decades. But it's happening. I want to close by making this personal. I'm 41 years old. I have a wife, 3 children. A life I'd like to live. I didn't get into politics because I wanted power. I got in because I was tired of watching my country suffer while everyone blamed us for our own suffering. I joined the military because I wanted to protect people. And the more I saw, the more I learned about how the system works, the more I realized the biggest threats to our people aren't extremists or terrorists. It's the quiet violence of exploitation. The contracts that steal our wealth. The debts that trap us. The puppet leaders who sell us out. That's the real enemy. And when I had the chance to do something about it, when the people asked me to lead, I couldn't say no. Because if not me, who? If not now, when? I know the risks. I've read Article 12. I know they've budgeted $15 million to kill me. But I also know this. If I spend my life afraid, they've already won. So, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to keep fighting, keep exposing, keep building. And if they kill me when they kill me, the movement doesn't die. Because it was never about me. It's about the idea that we deserve better, that Africa deserves better. And you can't kill an idea. If you're watching this and you're asking yourself, what can I do? Here's what I need from you. The document, this message, the truth. Don't let them bury it. Don't let the media spin it away. Keep it alive. If you live in a country whose government is involved in this, Israel, France, America, Britain, demand answers. Call your representatives. Organize. Protest. Tell them, we don't want our taxes funding coups and assassinations. We don't want our governments destroying sovereign nations so corporations can profit. If you're in business, trade fairly. Pay fair prices. Don't exploit loopholes. If you're a consumer, ask where your products come from, who benefits from your purchase. If you're an activist, amplify African voices. We're not victims waiting to be saved. We're people fighting for our freedom. Stand with us. This document is one example. But the pattern is everywhere. Learn the history. How many African leaders have been killed? How many coups have been backed by Western intelligence? How many resources have been stolen? Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And once enough people see it, the system can't survive. I know this has been heavy. 17 pages of conspiracy, assassination plots, media manipulation. It's easy to feel hopeless, to think, the system is too big, too powerful. What's the point? But let me leave you with this. They're panicking. If they were confident, they wouldn't have written this document. They wouldn't have budgeted millions to stop us. The fact that they're scrambling, that they're throwing money at the problem, deploying contractors, manipulating media means they're scared. Because they know the truth. Their power is fragile. It depends on our compliance, on our silence, on our belief that we're powerless. The moment we stop believing that, the moment we stand up and say no more, they lose. And that moment is coming. It's coming in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger. It's coming across Africa. And it's coming in other parts of the global south, Latin America, Asia, the Middle East. Everywhere people are waking up to the same realization. We don't need them, they need us. Our resources, our labor, our markets. We hold the cards. We just forgot. But we're remembering now. To the people of Burkina Faso, thank you for trusting me, for standing with me. This fight is ours together, and we're going to win. To the people of Africa, your time is coming. Hold on, organize, resist. We're building something bigger than any one country. We're building a future where dignity isn't negotiable. To the people of the global south, you're not alone. The same playbook used against us is used against you, but together we're stronger than their schemes. To the people of the West, I don't hate you. I don't blame you personally. But I need you to see what your governments are doing in your name, and I need you to stop it. And to the people who wrote this document, the ones who planned my assassination, who budgeted for my death, who thought they could erase me like a line item in a spreadsheet, you failed. The document is out. The truth is spreading, and you can't stop it anymore. You can kill me. You probably will. But this movement, this awakening, it's bigger than me now. You're not fighting Ibrahim Traoré. You're fighting history. And history is on our side. 3 weeks ago, a document landed on my desk, 17 pages that were supposed to stay secret forever. Now you know what's in them. Now you know what we're up against. And now you know why I fight. This isn't about politics. It's not about ideology. It's about survival, dignity, freedom. It's about whether Africa will finally control its own destiny or whether we'll remain a resource colony for the rest of the world. I've made my choice. The question is, what's yours? My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I'm the president of Burkina Faso, and I'm not going anywhere. Thank you.